The air in early May 2025 crackled with tension. A public confrontation between American and Russian diplomats sent shockwaves across the globe. This was not just another diplomatic spat. The Ukraine war, already brutal, seemed on the brink of terrifying escalation. The world watched, holding its breath. Every headline pointed towards a perilous new phase. The stakes were astronomically high. This was more than rhetoric, it was raw animosity. The implications were stark. If the two great nuclear powers couldn't maintain civility, what hope was there for peace? The clash signaled a hardening of positions. Leaders grappled with the unfolding crisis. The diplomatic machinery threatened to buckle under pressure. The old rules seemed to dissolve, replaced by grim uncertainty. The clock was ticking loudly. The United Nations Security Council chamber became a verbal battlefield on May 15, 2025. U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov did not hold back. Their words were sharp, barbed, dripping with accusation. Ambassador Thomas-Greenfield spoke first, condemning Russia's aggression in Ukraine. She accused Moscow of escalating the conflict and targeting civilians. Sergei Lavrov dismissed the U.S. accusations as cynical propaganda. He painted Russia as the victim, provoked by NATO expansion. The exchange was brutal, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The chasm between Washington and Moscow was wider than ever. This public clash was a performance for a global audience. The hope for a diplomatic breakthrough seemed to vanish entirely. The war of words promised more war on the ground. As diplomats traded barbs, the war in Ukraine roared into a new, more ferocious chapter. The spring thaw gave way to hardened ground, ideal for offensive operations. Both sides seemed determined to seize the initiative. Reports from the front lines painted a grim picture. Increased shelling, more sophisticated weaponry, and a surge in casualties. NATO ramped up military aid to Kiev. President Biden declared, "We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes." This resolve in the West stiffened Moscow's determination. The escalation was a vicious cycle, each action prompting a counteraction. Long-range strikes became more frequent. Critical infrastructure was targeted with renewed vigor. The human cost was immediate and devastating. More lives lost, more families torn apart. The international community watched with growing alarm. The spring of 2025 was one of renewed, brutal warfare. In mid-May 2025, the focus of the escalating conflict shifted north. Russian forces launched a significant offensive into Ukraine's Sumy region. This move caught many observers by surprise. It opened a new front, stretching Ukraine's defenses. Reports emerged of Russian troops capturing several border villages. The speed of the advance signaled a well-planned operation. The Kremlin's stated aim was to create a buffer zone. However, many Western analysts saw a broader strategic purpose, perhaps to draw Ukrainian reserves away from other critical sectors. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky sounded the alarm. He reported 50,000 Russian troops massed near Sumy. His pleas for more Western support grew urgent. The Sumy offensive was a stark reminder of Russia's offensive capabilities. This northern thrust followed earlier Russian military action. The fighting in Sumy quickly became intense. The skies over Ukraine and deep into Russian territory became a relentless battlefield in May 2025. Drone warfare intensified to unprecedented levels. Both sides deployed vast swarms of unmanned aerial vehicles. The psychological impact was immense. The constant buzz of drones overhead became a terrifying soundtrack. Russia reported downing 296 Ukrainian drones in 1 week. Ukraine stated that Russia launched a massive attack involving 88 drones and 5 ballistic missiles. These were part of a continuous high-stakes technological war. Drones range from small, commercially available models to sophisticated military drones. They hunted tanks, targeted artillery positions, and struck infrastructure. The drones provided real-time intelligence crucial for battlefield decisions. Air defense systems struggled to cope with the volume of threats. Jamming and electronic warfare became critical components. The drone war was a shadowy conflict, often unseen but profoundly felt. The skies were no longer silent. As tensions between Washington and Moscow reached fever pitch, former U.S. President Donald Trump entered the fray. From the sidelines, Trump made pronouncements that reverberated through the halls of power. He issued a stark warning to Russian President Putin, declaring on Truth Social that Putin was playing with fire. Reports surfaced that Trump and Putin had discussed a peace accord memorandum. The details were murky, but the suggestion of back-channel discussions raised eyebrows. The Kremlin's reaction to Trump's interventions was mixed. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov suggested Trump was not well briefed on the complexities of the war. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov welcomed Trump's mediation efforts. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev warned Trump about the risk of World War III. An envoy for Trump dismissed Medvedev's warning as reckless fear-mongering. The episode highlighted how Trump remained a disruptive force. His shadow loomed large. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization found itself walking an increasingly precarious tightrope. The alliance was united in its condemnation of Russia's aggression. It was committed to supporting Ukraine but desperate to avoid direct military confrontation with Moscow. This balancing act became more challenging as the war escalated. Russia lashed out with sharp accusations against NATO. Russia's defense minister Andrei Belousov accused NATO of exploiting the Ukraine crisis. He claimed the alliance was using the war as a pretext to increase its military presence in Eastern Europe. Belousov argued NATO's actions were provocative and a direct threat to Russia's security. From NATO's perspective, its actions were purely defensive. The alliance had significantly bolstered its eastern flank. Countries like Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states welcomed this increased presence. The Russian accusations aimed to sow discord within NATO. Maintaining alliance unity was paramount for NATO leaders. But as the war dragged on, internal debates about the right path forward became more intense. The tightrope was getting thinner. The public clash between the US and Russia, coupled with the fierce escalation in Ukraine, sent tremors across the globe. Political leaders worldwide issued statements. Some condemned Russia's renewed aggression, others called for an immediate ceasefire and a return to diplomacy. Many nations in the global south remained hesitant to take sides. Public opinion was a mixed tapestry of outrage, fear, and weariness. Russia controlled just under 1/5 of Ukrainian territory. The war continued to be incredibly costly, not just in terms of military expenditure but in human lives. The exact number of casualties remained unknown, but it was horrifically high. Millions of Ukrainians had been displaced from their homes. Many had fled the country, becoming refugees. Those who remained faced daily threats of shelling and missile strikes. Cities lay in ruins, livelihoods destroyed, families shattered. The psychological trauma inflicted on an entire generation would last for decades. The war in Ukraine was a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the devastating human cost of unchecked aggression. As May 2025 drew to a close, the world stood at a precipice. The path ahead was shrouded in ominous uncertainty. One terrifying possibility was continued, grinding conflict. A war of attrition that could drag on for years, consuming more lives and resources. Each side appeared convinced that military victory was still achievable. Then there was the even more chilling prospect of wider escalation. Dmitry Medvedev's World War III warning resonated with a deep-seated fear. Miscalculation, an unintended incident, or a desperate gamble could draw NATO directly into the conflict. The consequences of such a scenario were unthinkable. Amidst the gloom, faint glimmers of hope for diplomacy flickered. The alleged discussions involving Trump hinted that channels of communication might still exist. Perhaps exhaustion would eventually set in. Perhaps the sheer cost of the war would compel leaders to reconsider their positions. But for now, the drums of war beat louder than the calls for negotiation. The future hung precariously in the balance.